Hello, everybody. James here. Franchise University with Shane Douglas himself. Cheers to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm actually going to do some tiny bits of intro. So we're out every single Tuesday. I'm just going to harp on about this. You must know by now. I've also got story time with Dutch Mantel, with the eponymous Dirty Dutch Mantel every Friday and Tuesday. 5 stars on iTunes if you'd be so kind to rate this podcast or any of me podcasts. That'd be nice. And also, of course, if you're listening to this audio-wise, we have a YouTube channel as well. Shane Douglas Official, where we post every day, and we post the full shows on the YouTube channel at the same time we do-ish on the audio podcast. This is a new intro, Shane. I'm not used to it. But for this week, we are going to be doing news once again. And quite a news couple of weeks we've been dealing with as well. And the first thing I want to say to you, Shane, is we called something, or more specifically, you called something a few weeks ago when we last talked about it, and we were talking about Vince McMahon possibly unloading stock. Now, a couple of days ago, 30% of TKO stock of Vince McMahon's is being unloaded, which is worth around $700 million at this point. I've got more rhetoric here afterwards, but your immediate reaction to that?
Vince McMahon, my address is more than just a pretty face, I guess, right? Or well, not even that, I guess. But look, this just makes common sense, and you know, I don't know if the other part of this, if you're going to hit on it, the TKO board had met and sort of somehow this was released. I don't know if that was leaked or what, but basically the people on the board were saying, look, this guy's got a lot of baggage, and if we put him on the board, it's going to make us look bad.
Well, more specifically, Ari Emanuel himself went on, I don't know if it's CNBC or something like that, and named Vince McMahon by name, and basically said what you said. He's got a lot of baggage for two different reasons. One, the NDAs, of course, and two, federal investigation into, we're not still quite sure yet, but he's definitely under investigation.
Yeah. It's who knows what it could be, because we won't even dabble into all that. But this. I mean, let's face it: UFC, TKO, and Endeavor. Those are huge conglomerates. And in this day and age, the last thing they can do is go out and hire the guy that has whatever baggage, and especially that kind of baggage in today's world. So I was a bit shocked, because I would have thought that they would have immediately announced that, and there was that several month period where it was like sort of meandering through there, and I'm sure that probably has to do with legalities and what the wording of the contract and everything was, but did not shock me when I saw it. Like, oh, okay, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So we sort of stumbled on that one. But look, I mean, nobody should feel bad for Vince. I'll separate for a second. Everybody knows my personal feelings, or my feelings even for their product. But you can't argue with success, and when you whatever, put all that baggage into the blender. But Vince McMahon took wrestling to the stratosphere. There were a lot of really successful promoters and bookers and great performers over the years in our industry. None of them ever had the foresight to say, "Hey, maybe we could take it there." Wrestling was always, as I was coming up, was sort of blue collar. That's what like the working people do and stuff. And I remember when I was right prior to breaking into the business, going and because my dad had always taken me to the Pittsburgh Civic Arena. And I remember like looking around and thinking, like, it looks different in here. Like it wasn't all darkened. There was no smoking in the building. So like it used to be when I was a kid, you see the smoke wafting up into the lights. There's a guy in a business suit. There's a woman dressed nicely. I mean, it was like you could tell the clientele was changing. And then when we came into the business, or I came into the business, you're looking around. It was like Vince had waved the magic wand. It went from like a Wizard of Oz, like, suddenly we're not in Kansas anymore. And, and you can't argue with that. At one point, I don't know what it was at the time of the sale, excuse me, but the WWE was the 6th most recognizable brand on the planet. Now, when you stop and think about all the different products in your grocery store and commercials on your television and everything else, to be number 6 on that list is pretty incredible. So like, kudos to Vince. Like, he's an incredible businessman, but it's even for somebody as powerful as him, with as much money as he has, that reputation has a tendency to catch up to you. Like, what's that old saying? None of us is getting out of here alive. We're all gonna to look into the mirror far before the pearly gates and be judged by what we were here. And I think Vince the same thing. So it was no crystal ball; it was just common sense and looking at that. It's going to be interesting to see what he does beyond this.
I actually muted the cough, but I still said excuse me to sort of break that up. I'm going to give you a bit of a stock run through since TKO became a thing on September 12th. So the TKO stock opened at 103.05 on September 12th, peaked on the 19th of September at $105.50, and has since tanked nearly 25% since, with the current price being $79.26 as we record this, taking a sharp dip from a recent high this past Thursday of, I didn't write that down, it was like $85 something, not coincidentally right when Vince announced his selling of the shares. So this is clearly affecting TKO's bottom line, of course. But 30% is very, very significant. Does this signify one of two things? Do you think this is going to signify his exit from WWE? And two, do you think this signifies that he's going to unload all of his stock?
Most likely. Well, again, I think that'll be contingent on what's Vince's next chapter. The one thing I am pretty certain of is I don't see Vince McMahon wandering off into the sunset and the twilight of his life. He's a workaholic, and which is big part of the reason why he was able to sell that for $9 billion. I think it's more likely that he'll unload some of it. If past trend proves future, he'll buy it once it bottoms out. But this is one of the concerns. Yeah, there's no question in my mind that board, when this guy went public and said those things, they knew, what was coming, or at least the big possibility of it. And anytime Vince is a very public figure, right? So he's very well known. I've always said the most intelligent thing he ever did is to create the Mr. McMahon character, because I think there's a tendency amongst a lot of people that don't know him to say, oh, okay, well, that's just the guy he plays on TV. Well, that's really him. That's his, there is no stretch in that. So, and as such, I'm sure there's a lot of people that bought stock in part because of him, like him and his product and all of that, being so well known and so recognizable that when people hear, well, they're getting rid of him, well, you can see how a lot of them could say, well, it's not going to be successful, and without Vince, it can't work. And so get rid of it. My guess is they've certainly would have weathered that, and at least the possibility of it that if he dumps his stock, it's going to drop. But then again, as past proves prologue, if it proves prologue, he'll buy it back at a much cheaper stock. So not a bad little withdrawal from the bank, right? You go and take your money out, and you go back a couple of weeks later, and there's twice the money that you left in there because the value goes back up. Vince is no dummy, and I'm sure there's probably a good chunk of that. Again, it's just my guess, but that he's okay. We do that to me. Well, let me show you what I can do to your stock, and give you a little taste of it. But
so more strategic than a clean exit, you're thinking?
That would be my guess. Just based again on watching Vince. I learned a long time ago that Vince is one of those X factors that you really can't peg. You can't sit down and say, okay, James, let me give you a definition of Vince. And some parts of that'll be right, but then tomorrow he'll do something else and go, well, never saw that one. That's a new chapter in that book. He's a very bright guy, and he certainly knows what he's doing. I don't see him just washing it off. Vince ain't gonna have to worry about whether he can buy the family Christmas presents this Christmas, right? This is the stuff that Vince, I would think, does just like you and I worry about taking the garbage out and walking the dog and making sure the groceries are bought. Vince goes around and figures out like how he can topple the world. How can he get rid of this government or make this person's life miserable? So I think that if he retires, it'll be retired to his computer so he can say, okay, let's see what we can do to Warren Buffett's stock today, and things like that. He's never count Vince McMahon out.
Just because I was thinking about them when you would talk, right? So you're somewhat of a wordsmith. So there's obviously the word monopoly, and then there's something that's just under monopoly. Is it like monosopoly or something like that? Do you know the word? It's going to bug me.
Not right off the top of my head.
I'll tell you what. I'll figure it out for the next episode,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I'll move on. But I heard that word recently
I
for
love
the first
that.
time.
I love that game, Monopoly. That's a great
Yeah.
game. It's
Man, board flips over if I lose, I'll tell you that. With Monopoly, right, so with the free parking, all fines go to free parking, and then if you land on free parking, you win everything. Is that how you play it?
no, that's a little twist on the rule. I always play it with the way the boards, the way the box says, the inside of the box. It's
That's the worst way though, because because if you land on a property that's uninhabited, essentially, you have to bid on it, and if you don't buy it, then it becomes a bidding process to everybody else.
Oh wow!
And
Okay,
we never played that. So, but apparently they're the official rules of Monopoly. So yeah. So let's say you land on, because they'll be different for Americans than they will be for us. Because obviously the London streets. Anyway, Park Lane. And so if you land on Park Lane and no one's bought it, you either have to buy it or it becomes an auction process with every single person playing, and then you go in order of like, I will put this down, or I'll exit. Anyway, there you go. A little fact for you about Monopoly.
So another useless tidbit, but just an interesting thing. My mother, the first year that Monopoly was out, received one of those as a Christmas present. Has the wooden houses and the little wooden hotels, and I have no idea what that, if it's even worth anything. But it was always up in our closet, and that was when I played as a kid. That was the one we always played, was the original. The absolute original boardwalk. It folded up 4-way, so it was like a little square box, and the wooden things. It's just again completely useless trivia.
I'm looking at one on eBay now, £55. Oh, that's a shame. I thought it would have been worth more.
Yeah,
Never mind.
Yeah,
so
not worth it.
No, I know, but you should frame that though, because it's a pretty sweet looking box. Now, I've started using this with Dutch now. The low hanging fruit section of this podcast. Ric Flair has signed with AEW. Now, there's more to it than essentially him signing, because it comes with a sponsorship for his energy drink. So AEW is more or less getting him for either very cheap or free to basically plug his drink, and he's signed for 2 years. Do you want me to elaborate further on that, or are you happy to crack on and you know enough?
Yeah, it's Rick has an amazing chunk of information up here. One that, by my estimation, is vastly needed there, vastly needed in the industry right now. If he plays that role for them, he could be an invaluable resource. Again, past Proof's prologue, and that, I just heard this, by the way, that Arn has decided not to re-sign, feeling that his family needs, with the tragedy of his son, and which again my heart breaks. Arn is a good dude, and his wife's a sweetheart, and it just really a horrible thing. But they need that there, and like whenever I hear people telling stories multiple times, and saw it myself, and the 2 times that I've been, 3 times that I've been to an AEW show, that. I walk up to the bathroom. The first one, use the restroom in the locker room, and Billy Gunn comes up next to me. And I looked at him. Billy's usually a big old smile on his face. Billy's a huge guy, and hey Billy, how you doing? He goes, just trying to survive, brother. And I'm like, man, that's a different Billy. I said, wow. But so back to Rick, I think he could be an invaluable resource for that dressing room and for the office. Like it's not by happenstance that he's in some of the all-time classics, that had ever been seen in professional wrestling. My experience with Rick is that that's not his interest. And it's a shame, because boy, if you could just open that brain up and let some of that knowledge out, just, be like water in the flowers. And I hope for his sake that he's able to do that, because that really is that's his asset right now, right? Is I don't know if you noticed or not, we're all getting a little bit older and a little bit. By the way, this funky hair over here. It's the Pittsburgh water is like really dirty right now. I gotta get the purifier put in there. But the again, the eternal optimist in me, I guess, is that I hope that he divvies off some of that smarts, because like I've always said, and I am till the day I take my dying breath, I am so in the belief that these kids with their athleticism could be amazing if they would just absorb some of that. My fear is, knowing Rick like I know him, is that he will want to tend to get in there. I'd seen somebody had sent me something about him saying that he wants another match. Like, dude, like pacemaker, without belaboring that whole dead horse. Go in there, be the elder statesman. Be the founding father of this business, and divvy off that information and bring those kids, whether they want to or not, grab them by the nose. Because I doubt that if Ric Flair walked up to some kid in that dress, let me talk to you, that kid's gonna go, oh, can't teach me anything, legend. I'm going to go over here. Thanks. Please be that. Please be that for the industry. The industry needs it. The only thing that I was shocked about, and again, it shows you how out of the loop I am on stuff, is I had thought that he would have had some kind of contractual agreement with WWE. And
well, I can actually tell you why he doesn't. So he wants to get his energy drink sponsored, and WWE already has an existing energy drink under sponsorship, and they can't have two conflicts of interest, of course. So that's why he ended up going to AEW, which is a story in and of itself. But that is why he's with AEW, not WWE.
Yeah. I played ignorance here because on the energy drink thing, I have a regular heartbeat, so I don't partake with the drinks. In fact, we'll get into some energy drink discussion in one of the future episodes, I think. But it's my experience that whenever I watch people in the store, you walk in, there's 9,000 of these energy drinks, is that they tend to buy one or two or three brands. I know Moose, he drinks those, and he drinks a brand, and he doesn't go and say, well, this one's on sale today, so I'll buy two of those. And I just don't know that to be like one of those saturated markets. Like, the planet only needs so many energy drinks. And by the way, just for the parents out there, if they're not aware of this, understand that like younger kids, we tend to think that how indestructible they are and stuff. There have been instances where kids that are taking those, either a few months back, there was a 16 or 17-year-old girl that died, was cramming for a study and was drinking those, all day. And they can cause, they're not a soda. They're not just a drink in the cooler that your kid can get and drink. Keep an eye on that, and let them know how dangerous they can be if overdone.
We've got legislation here. You cannot sell energy drinks to children under 16.
Wow, good. I don't think there's anything here like that, but it speaks more about our government and what it's not doing. But yeah, that's good. That's a smart idea. Not that, everybody knows my feelings on too much regulation and stuff, but I think that, there's the phrase young and dumb. And I always tell people, like, when I say this about my kids, I said to my older son one time, he goes, Dad, do you think I'm stupid? I said, oh, no. My God, no, that's not what that means. I said, what it means is you're young and inexperienced. You haven't lived in the world. So, old wise smiths like us, or that we like to think we are, we have that experience. We've heard those stories, and we've, a lot of us have known people that have done that stuff, and some of us had some personal experience with energy drinks. So, yeah, point taken.
I need to cut out saying a lot. I know I do it. I apologize. It's just a tick that I really have to get out. Anyway.
It's natural, though.
I know. I don't like it, though. It bugs me when I do it myself. I want to pick up on something you said before, and you were hoping that Ric Flair could be, as you say, that elder statesman. He can help some of the younger people out there. But best I can tell, with Ric Flair, he's only ever got one wrestler into the business, and that was Stan Lane, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, people out there, but that's the only one I know of. And I don't remember him ever being a mentor, at least longer term, to anyone in wrestling. Is Rick, when you were around him as a young pup in the industry, was he someone you could actually go to and get advice from? Because I've
No.
never heard anyone say Ric Flair was a fabulous mentor to me.
Yeah. Sting, he worked with Sting at the peak of his powers, Rick's powers, right? Phenomenal in the ring. And he would have had that same match, whether it was with Sting or Rick Rude or whoever. Rick had by that time of his career, had those 2 or 3 different standard matches. Ricky Morton would be a very different match than, say, a Sting or a Warrior that could press him and throw him.
But he's got a vested interest in that as well, because he needs opponents. But I'm saying someone like, to pluck a name out of the air, Tom Zank. Someone like that. Would Ric Flair not give him the time of day?
Zero. For the one person I remember that on the public side of it looked like he was trying to help was Brian Pillman. Brian came in and almost immediately, Rick seemingly took him in appearance under his wing. And I would later talk to him and ask him, like, what's he saying? What's he like? Give me an idea of what's going on there. And nothing. It was nothing. It was so, I'm sure that there have been times in Rick's past where he's, I say that in my own experience was zero. When you're a kid in this business, this is an incredibly different, acting. Yes, there's some part of that. And what the percentages are, I'll leave that to the fans out there. Athletic prowess obviously is a big ingredient. It's hard to look around that dressing room and say, like I pointed out with Mick Foley on a past episode, like, he does that sort of sidewalk and, looks like all discombobulated and everything. But when you watch him in the ring and his foot placement is, it's semantically sound. So all of these are pieces, the ingredients of what goes into a blender to make a great wrestler. But it's not just being a great actor. It's not just being a great athlete, or I shouldn't say great actor, being an actor at times, or being a great athlete. Those are all part and parcel of it. But then there's a whole lot of X factor that goes in: personality, how much heart somebody has, like what's their driving motivation to it, and there's so many intangibles that you really can't quantify, X and Y factors. So like when you're that young kid coming in, you just went to the ring and had a shitaroo, it just, it, you could feel it. You just know it wasn't a good match, but as a kid, if you'd said, here's $1 million, tell me what you did wrong. If you watched it back, you might be able to point out something or other, but you would never even come close to scratching what was wrong with the story, or what was the nuanceical stuff in it. And it's people like the older people in the dressing room, like, again, without belaboring the point, the Black Barts and Pez Whatleys and Slaters and Murdochs and Eddie Gilberts and all these guys that I had the pleasure of working with and learning from, that on a night-to-night basis would come back and go, okay, tonight, when you did this, you fucked it up because, and blah, 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 blah. They put it in context for you. At that moment, you didn't go, okay, ding, got it. It was just another piece of the puzzle in that head, where at some point down the road, distant point down the road, I think Steve Austin and I both agreed, it's like 5, 6, 7 years, where you go like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'm sort of getting it. It starts to make sense. Again, that's where the guys, like I just mentioned, and Flair being that measuring stick of a performer. I mean, just a really amazing in-ring performer. That he could divvy off so much of that. And, again, when I say like the stuff that everybody knows my story with him, so I don't have to belabor that, but even when David came in, you could see it in David almost immediately, like a very, very different person from Rick. Pleasurable, polite, respectful, nice kid. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that's a tough spot. If you come in and your name's San Martino, or your name is Piper, or your name is Steamboat, or Flair, you're getting judged differently, right? You're not being judged at the kid from New Brighton, like the kid from New Brighton, Pennsylvania is. You're getting compared to that guy, and I remember thinking to myself, I never saw him even really interact with David. It was just sort of like David was one of the guys in the dressing room. And, I sort of blather on here because I could stop and think to myself, like, I wouldn't want to go in there and make it look like I'm giving my kid, hey, let me push you up a little bit and prop you up or give you some, some juice here. But, it's, I would seem to think that if your son's coming in and you're putting him out there as Flair, David Flair, you pull him aside and go, hey, okay, let me talk to you. Rick always had his own dressing room, right? So pull him in there and go, okay, let's watch your match. Okay, why'd you do this? This is not right. Or look how you had your back turned, or whatever, divvied out. Maybe he did that behind closed doors. I never saw it with David. It seemed like like two trains passing in the night. There was no real overt interaction there. And I know that, because me and Zank and Pillman and Austin and Ace, all of us, we traveled off and on together. It was a pretty tight group. And I remember Steve Austin being one of the first to say it. Say, hell, we're just going to have to fight for it. Like they ain't he ain't going to give it to us. So it became a very overt thing to us that, not that we're going to go in there and be disrespectful or try to hurt them in the ring or anything like that. It was just going to be, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to butt heads because it's we're here to take ours if we have to. And so I think guys like Zank didn't really have that kind of personality. Johnny was very much more motivated towards the office side of things. But for guys like me and Steve and Pillman and many others at that time, I remember it being a very open thing. Okay, we're just gonna have to do it. And so I like I said, I think I prefaced whenever we were talking about it earlier, him going to that. I just can't see it, but hopefully, because let's face it, the guy's 75, 6 years old, whatever. Apologize if I'm adding too many to that, but it's he looks great in a suit, right? It's be that guy. It's and look, this business is incredibly intoxicating. When you're in front of a crowd and you can play that crowd and set them up and set them down on that, it's an incredibly powerful drug. So I get the whole want to do it, but at some point it's time to just say, okay, I can go over here and I can do a lot more good than talking to all these kids in the dressing room or pulling them aside after their match and not getting in there and taking the bumps. And again, with the pacemaker and the medical issues and things like that, there isn't a wrestling fan on the planet that wants to see Ric Flair die in the ring. My guess is that in some perverse way, that's what Richard Flair has planned for that character. Let's face it, Ric Flair in the annals of that work of the business, that's the perfect setting, right? That's the sunset behind Scarface, as the posters as they're wheeling him by. But he could be an incredibly useful resource to our industry at a time that it is desperately needed. So, again, I'll play the eternal optimist and hope that's what he's going to do and be that for them. But I just, knowing him, I can't see it. And I'm wrong on that.
Now, sadly, I'm going to skip away on the Tony Khan situation with hiring Rick when they wouldn't hire him a couple of years ago, etc., etc. If we've got time, I'll come back to it at the end. I'm actually going to miss out something on Big Show Paul White as well. If we've got time, I'll mention it at the end, but we've got so much stuff to do. Did you see the NWA Samhain spots with Jim Mitchell?
I did not.
Well, why don't we watch it together then? 1 second.
Yeah. By the way, whenever I lean forward like that, you lose me?
No, you're absolutely fine. I've started recording now as well. So I won't cut it out. I'll be fine. Right, so we're going to watch this from the NWA Samhain pay-per-view. I've not teed you up of what this is whatsoever, so this was a segment in between some of the matches. Tell me what you think about it.
Gentlemen, joining us yet again, NWA Samhain's ambassador of Macabre, Father James Mitchell.
Wow, they're really partying. Whoa, they are really partying. What? Well, they lost the match, but they seem to be having a pretty good time.
Yeah. Whoa, what's going on?
Whoa, okay.
Tell us, for the audio listeners, tell us what you're seeing.
Whoa.
Hey, I don't want to go up
there.
Can't do that.
They're doing. It looks like they're doing drugs.
Yep.
I kind of want to go up to that.
What?
Maybe they're just enjoying. I don't know, but I thought we were supposed to hear from Father James Mitchell, but I think he's a little busy, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
He is partying up.
Yeah.
Good time.
The newly formed.
How far are we? It does continue for about a minute.
Down in the dumps and really depressed, but obviously they They must have talked to Father James
Yeah, they don't
Mitchell.
even
Or
look too bad.
Jim Mitchell's doing the woozy thing.
Yeah.
I keep looking at Tim Storm. I've seen this a few times now. Poor Tim Storm. I think he just looks like really awkward.
Miserably faithful. I mean, Father James Mitchell
Yeah.
abused
It's
Sal and Gags to escape
There
and
we go.
just couldn't get it done here
And it
Samhain.
continues.
But the celebration
Yeah.
is continuing.
So that was on the most recent NWA pay-per-view. Now, this apparently also may have cost NWA their chance at being on the CW network, because now NXT and WWE's NXT is now going to be on CW network, and it was reportedly said that because of the cocaine spot there that we saw, as we said on Dutch's show, hell of a bump.
But bump.
No, he took a hell of a bump there, old Jim Mitchell. Anyway, so apparently talks actually accelerated after that went viral with WWE, and it looks like CW Network may have gone with WWE instead of NWA, and that may have cost them a TV deal.
Yeah, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, this is pretend like play, right? I mean, it's, you know, like full disclosure, right? My character especially pushed the envelope quite far in ECW. So I don't want any of the fans, please don't think I'm being hypocritical. But would we have pushed that envelope in certain ways that we did, doing some of those types of things, if we had a network looking at us and potentially putting us on the air? To the contrary, Paul would come to me and say, you need to, if you go back and look in those like 93-4 era of ECW, one of my go-to lines in my promos was, the marquee outside says wrestling. When I look it up in Webster's, wrestling is a sport. It's a goddamn sport. Mm-hmm. It's a shoot. It's a goddamn shoot. And Paul came to me and said, stop saying that, because at the time that UFC was getting hammered, they were having tons of trouble getting licensed in certain states because people were likening them and us to human cockfights. They thought we were going out there and really, doing this stuff to each other. And so he had me pull that back. So when I watch a segment like that, the first thing that goes into my brain is, who in God's name okayed this? Like, who at the production meeting went, oh, this is going to be a great spot, man. This is going to really sell it to everybody. I'm one of those guys that if you go back and look at like the old, and we just had a big run here of horror movies because of Halloween. And I caught the original Bela Lugosi Dracula. And, by today's standards, the kids go, oh, that's boring. But boy, the psychological stuff of that. There's no ripping the throat out and blood squirting across the wall.
You never see the bite. You never see the bite, do you, in the old ones? No. Because, and this is the Hitch... I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
The Hitchcockian deal of, no matter what you show on screen, will never compare to what you can conjure up in your own mind as far as horror.
Amen. So imply it. Have them turn their backs and doing something. You're like, oh, what are they doing? Looks like they're doing something they shouldn't be doing on camera. But by being the overt part of that and doing that, and God, I know I sound old and like prudish here, but as a father, most parents go, hey, sure, my kid can watch wrestling. Yeah, it's gonna be great. They're thinking the WWE sports entertainment stuff. And we could get into the finer points. There's some pretty risque things that they had done over the years too, but to put something like that so overtly on screen normalizes it. And I would contend that today there's probably more than a few parents out there concerned about fentanyl and everything else, like we all are. That to do that in an attempt to normalize it, there's not heat in that, and there's not. Okay, you're putting a certain smarm on this character that James's character plays and all of that. But I think a 17 or a 16 or a 14-year-old person watching wrestling today is probably not quite as mature as a 16 or a 14-year-old was 20 years ago. And I wouldn't show it to them then, that kind of stuff. There were in ECW, there's a whole lot of implied stuff. I don't recall, and I may be wrong on this because I never watched every episode of, every segment of every episode, but we were on at 2:00 in the morning in most places. We were intentionally going to that adult audience. But again, like I always say about history, we're in 2023. So to sit back and say, well, in 1993, we did this in ECW, different lens. I don't know if anybody else has noticed out there, a little tiny difference in the planet out there than 1993. So yeah, I would really love to hear some explanation from somebody inside the company as who approved this, who thought of it, who said, yeah, let's put it on camera, especially as you have a television network looking. One of the things that we were pitching the wrestling promotion several years ago was about just that, like what content could we show, what things can, what stuff do we stay 10 miles away from, not because it's controversial, but because there may be a segment of viewers out there going, you know what? Like we talked off screen earlier about, and I'm sure it's like that in Europe as well. When I turn on an NFL football game and I'm getting slapped all over the face with people's politics, I want to watch a football game. I love politics more than most, but I don't want to. I just want to see some people hitting and tackling. And by the way, I got to brag about my son for a second. If we're going to talk about football, if I can. Oh, yeah. My youngest son had his final game of his career, of his high school career, final game of the season. They had a crappy year, the team overall, and 13-12. We're up, 7 minutes left. Our guy, for some unknown reason, picks the ball up that was going to either roll out of bounds or into the end zone at the 1 foot line, stopped at the 2-yard line. Long and short, a few minutes later, they got the ball on the 7-yard line, 1st and goal to go. If they score, we've lost the game. So my son makes the first tackle. Guy picks up 2 yards, gets to the 5-yard line, makes the tackle. 3 yards, gets to the 4-yard line. Second one, my son makes the hit in the backfield, yard loss at the 5-yard line. Third one, my son in the nose tackle position intercepts the ball, runs the quarterback over, and runs 95 yards for a touchdown in the final play of his career. I was just so incredibly proud of him. But, back to this. I mean, this is one of those things you can see where the thinking is. Okay, we're going to put this kind of rub onto this character. He's got all these pretty women around and all. I get it. And James' character's always been phenomenal at pushing that kind of envelope. But sometimes something implied, whether it's turning the back to the camera and, mimicking it or whatever, that does even that could be questionable, but that does a lot more than the spoon up the nose and all the rest, the stuff that we just witnessed, especially as you're talking to television executives about, because what we're talking about right now is they're not talking down to anybody. Everybody understands what we're talking about here is that if I'm a network executive and I'm looking at that and I'm going, well, I don't want some pissed off parent that, kids has a drug problem or something calling me and say, hey, you're glorifying this. And, there's a lot better ways to push our envelope, our industry to push the envelope than to push it like that. If you'd have said that to me beforehand and said, let me show you this clip and this is what it is, come on, you're pulling my leg, right? Boy, what a boneheaded move.
To apparently make it even worse, CW were apparently maybe going to pick up 2 shows for the NWA. One was going to be the main show, Power, and the other one was a backstage reality show that Billy Corgan, I believe, has already paid for himself. So it could have cost them a heck of a lot more money than meets the eye with that. We are going... Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, go right ahead. I mean, has the company put out any kind of comment? I mean, what is the...
I don't think so. Not at this point. I don't think so. I mean, what do you say?
Yeah. Well, throw yourself on the sword and hope for the best. But yeah, just and I don't know. I mean, let's just move on. Wow. Speechless. And I'm not often speechless, but that's one of them.
Yeah, there's something that I wanted to bring up, and this wasn't news-based, but it was something that we could do. We could do an entire show on, I'm sure, but we'll do the very short version. I was listening to Lance Storm talk very recently about too many wrestlers out there today are chasing the elusive 5 stars from a Dave Meltzer or another journalist or whatever reviewer they respect their opinion of, instead of focusing on the story. And once again, I keep bringing up Dutch. I apologise about that. But story time with Dutch Mantel, everyone. Fridays and Tuesdays. And Chris, put a logo up, for God's sake. And I said to Dutch, to make money in the wrestling business, correct me if I'm wrong, but wrestling's almost the least important part of it. It's the build to the match. It's the investment of the story, and it's the same with wrestling. It's the same with boxing. It's the same with tiddlywinks. I'm sure it's the same with pickleball. You know what I mean? It's the same for absolutely everything. But
should be.
Yeah. What percentage of the young guys that you speak to in companies or just on the indies that get it, and the others ones who are always chasing the best match on the card?
Very few, if any. I was at a Rhino show the other night, worked with a young kid, couple young kids, his manager, and the kid plays like a young shooter character. And they wanted just a quick little blurb, like 4 or 5 minute segment, just to, again, we're the curtain jerk. So it's just going to be go out there, excuse me, get the crowd and apologize for the belching. This is the drinks and the coffees and stuff that I have to keep the vocal cords lubricated. But so as I was, the kid came and he was like, giving some input, which I always love. And I'm old enough now that I can take words and I can see them in my head, and I can pretty accurately figure out how the crowd will react to that. And I said, well, we could make a couple changes. I let it run through my head a couple times and said, okay, got it. Almost learned that from Steamboat. You run it through, and then you see it and lay it out. I said, if we do it the way you want to do it, the crowd, there will be some people in the crowd that will be confused because they won't really quite catch. We don't have a TV commentary going on at the same time in a live event to say, what just happened was blah, blah, blah. So let the referee stay turned to your manager as he's come up underneath my legs and slid you, do a double down, slid you my chain or something that looks like my chain, and you hit me with the chain, cover, the referee drops in 1, 2, sees the chain, then disqualifies. And then I had to explain it to him, like the psychology of this. Okay, if he turns around and catches you with the chain and just rings the bell, really anticlimactic. The crowd's gonna be, that's a weird place to stop the match. But if you go through with it, you've knocked my ass down. Everybody thinks, oh shit, they're gonna slide this kid over. Slides in there 1, 2. The referee goes, no, oh, hold on, ding, ding, ding. And the crowd bought it pretty much exactly as I figured it would. And we got the reaction we were looking for. And afterwards, I went back and reiterated to the kids, like, okay, this is why we did it this way. And think if you'd have done that, and I'm trying to get him to be able to do the same thing. And I couldn't at that age either, but run this through. If you would have hit me or been caught before you hit me and dropped at the crowd, that response we got from the crowd would have been somewhere down here. It would have been confusing to a bunch of them. And so, back to what you were saying, and the kids that are getting it, it's not that. It's, I didn't do my backflip yet. Hold on. I know we're supposed to finish a minute ago, but I got to get up on the top rope and do a backflip so the fans know I can do it. No, it's your match is 1 pixel in that mosaic. And so like in our case, first match the other night, just a quick little blurb in there to get the crowd. Oh, hey, Shane Douglas is here and he beat this kid. Just to get people, oh, hey, the matches have started. Let's get back to our seats. Hey, Joey in the bathroom. The matches are starting. It has nothing to do with that. So you have to play all that into it. And you're right. The story that goes into the buildup to these angles, that is so much. What sells WrestleMania? It's not this wrestler versus that wrestler. It's what this wrestler did to this wrestler for 6, 7, 8 months leading up to that. And all of that is gone. And back to Flair, I would hope that's the kind of stuff that he could, not just to the kids, but to Tony Khan or whoever's writing that stuff, to play some of that into it. It's a lost art. And I see my business. I've been around it long enough now, a lot longer than I care to say. But when I was a kid watching wrestling, that young 6, 7, 8-year-old kid watching wrestling, studio wrestling out of Pittsburgh, Back then, right beforehand, was roller derby. And I loved roller derby almost as much as I love wrestling. And when's the last time you watched roller derby on television? It never expanded. It made an attempt like in the 80s or 90s to come back, and they had like a Shark Tank thing they had to jump over, like stuff like that. And it just never quite caught back on. It didn't mold with the times. It didn't grow and come along with it. And our business is now at a point where, okay, we all know the kids are athletic, amazingly athletic. But Bruno Sammartino never did a single backflip in his life. All he did was sell at every building for 12 years straight. We're at a crossroads here. Like the roads are splitting, and we can either keep going down the path we're down as the audience continues to do this, and it's done that for the last 25 years now. Every subsequent year for 25 years has been lower than the preceding year. We can continue down that path, or we can go, hey, wait a second. That kid MJF, who's this tall, he's getting amazing reaction. How? Why? Got a blurb, an email from a friend in Germany, Wolfgang Stock, who runs Power Pro Wrestling magazine over there. Great guy. He went to the All In show in London and was raving about the MJF match. I said it had been years since he'd seen a match that he even cared about. And I wrote back and asked him questions. Why was that match so compelling? And he said, well, the story. He said the whole thing, the whole story, and they did this and they did that. And he's sitting at a computer, and he's right off the top of his head, he's throwing out what happened in that story. That means it sunk in. His brain cells absorbed that. And now he's ready to see the final outcome of that. And MJF is amazing at what he does. He's playing an old school heel. We need a ton more of that into the business. And I typically preface with this, but I'll throw it in now. I'm not indicting the kids in the business today. They've never seen that. They've never had that. And everybody thinks, okay, well, next year's got to be different from this year, and this year is different from last year. Yeah, in some ways it can grow and push and expand. And, my distaste for the anime stuff and whatever. Okay, well, that's because I'm an older guy and I'm not into anime. But if this is what the kids want to put into it, just make it make sense. Tell that story. And if you could couple that amazing athleticism that you guys have with a little bit of storytelling, then it makes that move so much bigger. Sabu, and I'll finish with this. When we first get to ECW, I've been reading about Sabu, but I had never seen him. Back then you'd read about stuff in the sheets and stuff. We didn't have the internet and all that to be able to pull up Japanese matches or whatever. And the first time I see Sabu doing the triple jump moonsault, I'm at the monitor in the back, sitting and watching the monitor. I've seen at this point millions of wrestling matches in my life. And he sets the chair up. And the guy's laying there, and then he runs away from the guy, jumps over the guy, jumps on him. What the hell's he doing? Hits the top rope and moonsaults over the chair onto the guy. I exploded out of my chair like a kid at a wrestling show. My God, it was amazing to watch. Every fan in that building knew what Sabu was capable of doing. So the last thing they want is just let him do it. Let him go out there and hit every big move he knows, and let's get in there and out of there. We'll be done. 3 minutes tops, or we'll be done. So when I first started working with him, you could tell when somebody doesn't like you, and try as I might, it just got this vibe. He didn't like working with me, didn't like me. And the reason I would later find out was two things. I would call him by his shoot name, which is the way I was taught, and never did again after I realized he didn't like that. But when we would work, I would let him set his stuff up, and I'd cut him off. Set his stuff up, cut him off. Set it up, cut him off. And each time the crowd's going, oh, he's going to do it. He's going to, oh, shit. They're up and they're down. They're up and they're down. They're up and they're down. Once you've done that X number of times and you're experienced enough, you can feel when the place is ready to blow. Hit your shit, big boy. Do it. Now, boom, the roof explodes off the place because they knew he's going to sooner or later get it, and they don't. And then finally they do. Please tell that story. And I don't know how this is not permeating that dressing room. You got Dean Malenko back there, Taz back there, Jerry Lynn back there, Billy Gunn back there. You had Arn back there. You had Tully back there. Jake's back there. You got all these people in that dress. I mean, just sit under that learning tree and apply some of that. It's not just how many moves can you do and how fast you can do them. Okay, it's athletic, great. Now tell me a story. That's what takes me on the ride. That's what lured me in as a kid. It's like reading a comic book. What's happening next? What's Lex Luthor going to do to Superman next? Holy shit. And going through it. Don't just page one. Okay, Lex Luthor does it. Superman beats him. Okay, who's the heel next month? I as you can tell, I get passionate about this because I love and I want to see what these kids can do if they would apply that athleticism to storytelling. It's really, really that simple.
Now,
and I completely agree with Lance. Lance, by the way, is become one of those trainers out there that's trained a shit ton more of the guys that you expect that are really talented in the ring and know how to do this kind of stuff. And Lance is one of those guys. Like I've rarely heard Lance say something that didn't make sense. And I think he's as great as he was in the ring. He was always a bit vanilla to me in the ring, but boy, he's become that Dominic DeNucci trainer of today of, taking these guys and getting that instilled in them. So completely agree.
Now, next on the agenda, we're sort of going completely elsewhere here. John Moxley, a couple of weeks ago, about maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I can't remember when it happened, but sustained a pretty bad concussion. You know the original story, don't you? So they had to change the match finish, and it was for a belt. It's for the AEW international title or whatever. They got so many belts, it's hard to keep track of which one's which. But he ends up getting a concussion or even multiple concussions. We don't know. And he gave an interview to The Messenger a couple of weeks ago, saying the concussion ultimately sent him out into effing outer space for like 10 minutes. My brother's ringing me now, I'll just cancel that. Pro wrestling is such a strange thing. In football, if a guy goes down and he doesn't get back to the huddle, you know he's effed up. In pro wrestling, a lot of times it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. John Moxley then proposes the following. Now, this is a bit convoluted. I'm sure we'll come up with a better answer, or you will. Maybe a really experienced wrestler and a really experienced doctor who are trained to see the signs of that stuff are watching it on a separate feed, even if they have a doctor close to ringside. What if the guy effing spills outside the ring? He doesn't see that. I'll skip more of that. In fact, it gets more convoluted, essentially. So John Moxley has suffered a pretty bad concussion. He's been out for quite a few weeks now, and he wants to see reforms in the business. How does one reform concussion protocol in wrestling today?
Oh, man. Well, we believe it or not, when we worked on the promotion, this was a big deal. We actually worked with Dr. Benjamin Malu, who was the first to identify CTE. It's not quite as easy, but first of all, better to be safe than sorry, right? So if you see somebody, there was a match a few years ago, 8-man tag, where a guy was not cold in the match. And there was a doctor literally sitting 2 feet from the apron looking, and the guy's head is like right on that side of the ring. It's obvious to anybody. I've been in the business long enough to understand, and I probably see it quicker than most. But you can see this guy's out. There ain't any lights on. And the doctor's just sitting there. And the guys continue to take bumps around him. And one guy finally grabs him by the limp hand and drags his lifeless body over to the corner. I'm thinking, oh, my God, that's the last thing you do. What if he has a neck injury? You just paralyzed or killed him. And the doctor's sitting watching that. And I'm thinking, like, initially when I first watched that, okay, this is an angle they're doing for some reason, because it doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to have a doctor sit at ringside, you can't be like Shane Douglas in a Steamboat match, watching the match and like a fan. You got to be in as a doctor watching and knowing these signs. You need to then also smarten the doctor up as to when you see no movement, there's clearly something wrong, because our business is not dead lump of flesh in the ring. When you're selling, you're still moving and keeping your head up and things, so the fans can see that, and we as the trained eye can see, oh, he's fine. If somebody drops down and holds their leg and you're bumping all over them and everything, okay, flash, he's probably got a knee injury or an ankle injury or something. they've got to communicate that. You got to smarten these people up. And I know we're going to talk about a match in another episode coming up, but I did spot something in that, and we'll talk about that in that episode. But I spotted something in that which was really a big ingredient as to why TNA failed ultimately. That original incarnation. One of the smartest things that Vince McMahon ever did was he hired a full-time crew, and he smartened that full-time crew up so they knew what selling is. They knew what shine was. They knew what heat was, and they knew what was important to stay on camera if you want to pan to somebody in the audience or whatever. You need to smarten the crew up, and I have no idea how Tony Khan has done that in AEW, if they've done that. But if you're going to have a doctor sitting at ringside, it can't just be, hey, we need a doctor here. So let's go, Dr. Smith. Let's call it. Hey, Dr. Smith, can you come down to the building tonight? We need you down here for a commission requires we have a doctor. You got to have a doctor that understands this, that watches and knows, like, holy shit, this guy's in trouble. So that you don't have a guy that ends up paralyzed or killed or concussed. Seriously concussed. First of all, my concern and thoughts go out to John. That is a serious thing. Back when I was a kid in the business, I remember one time coming back after getting concussed, and Bill Watts saying, "Oh, thank God, it's just a concussion." I remember thinking, like, I don't use my brain all the time, but once in a while I do. We've gone to a different place, and we're more well aware of the damage long term that CTE can cause to somebody. And if you've not seen the movie Concussion or read Amalu's work, you need to. It's stunning, this stuff. Mike Webster, the center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, great teams in the 70s. This is what ultimately contributed to his death. And what that man was living through at the end of his life, and others like him, Junior Seau and so many others in the NFL. This is like literally living in hell on earth. So that concussions are incredibly dangerous to the body. Not physically, yeah, you can get up and walk around and look semi-normal, whatever, but your brain gets used once in a while, and your perception, your reality comes from that. So I wish Jon Moxley the best in recovery, and hope that he follows whatever protocols they want him to. Ultimately, that answer your question in a long-winded, roundabout way, I think there is, because of wrestling being what it is, a presentation, that there's going to be times when something might slip through the cracks, but much better that something slipped through the cracks than it become the standard of the norm. There's a doctor sitting there that's not really well-versed in what we do, and a guy's injured, concussed, hurt, neck injury, whatever. And he thinks it's part of the show because he's just the guy they called up locally. But for not just AEW, NWA, Ring of Honor, TNA, Impact, WWE, I know has certain protocols. Things will still slip through the cracks, but it should be in spite of the protocols, not due to a total lack of protocols or weak protocols. And for the young kids out there that have never experienced the concussion, talk to Jon Moxley in that dressing room. Get his firsthand experience to understand what that is, because it's an incredibly scary thing when it first happens to you. And it does have long-term effects. There's times now when I'm, and I did very little of that. Thank God in my career had relatively few serious concussions. Thank God. But there are times like when I'll misplace my keys, and I'll think like, oh, in my experience, CTE, I can't find my keys. Just stupid little things like that. And realize that it's not even like on those big concussions. It's the preponderance of what we do. How many times is any wrestler's head in there been thrown into the turnbuckle? Well, each time in the movie Concussion, there's a scene where he picks up a pickle jar. There's one pickle and juice in the jar, and he shakes it back and forth. And as the pickle bangs off the sides of the jar, he said, "That's your brain in the brain cavity hitting off the sides of the cranium." And so each time, every body slam, every suplex, every big bump we take, we've heard all the different euphemisms that it's like being in a car accident at 30 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour or whatever. Well, each time your brain is getting jarred in that stuff and these turnbuckles. So we need to, as an industry, like I've talked long and often about how Vince McMahon took the industry to these stratospheric heights, but still there's things like that are still left back in the 40s as things were done then. Independent contractors are like, well, if you turn your brain to mush, James, it's your fault. I didn't tell you to take that slam or that suplex. I think our business needs a real wake-up call to that. And I know WWE has some stringent protocols in place, and I know that it's got an acronym, and I can't recall because, again, we worked on this with Dr. Malu. They do, like, I know my son in playing football every year, they take a test at the beginning of the year. It's a cognitive test. And then if they think you've been concussed, they give you that test again. And your reaction time.
Is it an impact test?
I believe so. There's something like that. It's got an acronym like a word, and you can't cheat it. You can't, bone up on it or whatever. Your times will slow down, and considering pertaining to how much it slows down, they can decide, okay, you're here or here on the protocols. And I know, like in high school sports, they've now started taking that very seriously. So if you take that test and you score lower, you're not playing that week. It doesn't matter if you want to or not, because newsflash, everybody in that dressing room wants to go out and perform tonight. It's up to us, being the people running the companies, to make sure that we don't allow you to go out and do more harm to yourself. And so, enough said about that. That's a very serious issue, not just in wrestling, in every kind of contact sport. And it's time that people that have not experienced that or familiar with it, it's time to bone up on that, especially if you have kids playing high school ball or young, middle school, elementary school, whatever. If there's concussion or pre-concussion, that you need to take that incredibly seriously, because that could do great long-term harm.
We shall move on. This isn't really news so much as this is The Undertaker recently talking about it in depth for maybe the first time publicly. And he is talking about asking for a raise in WCW. Now, you were around this time in WCW as well, so I thought I'd get your reaction to these quotes. I'm going to mess this quote up slightly because sort of The Undertaker messes it up. But anyway, the meeting was to renegotiate my contract. I had asked for the meeting because my contract was coming due. I was on the standard entry-level contract, was maybe $1,200 a week. This is 1989, early 1990. It was time to renegotiate my contract. I was at that point in my career in life. I was a WCW guy. I enjoyed the product better, being from Houston. We didn't get enough of Vince, and etc., etc. Anyway, he just wants a bump in pay. So, Undertaker says, I went in and I met with Jim Barnett and Ole Anderson and Jim Herd. I gave him my speech. I love it here. I've learned so much this year and I'm really happy. My contract is coming up. I was at $1,200 a week, as reiterated. And basically, he wants something like $2,000 a week. Undertaker gives him the whole story, and it was crickets. It was quiet. Ole was the first one to speak, and he's like, kid, you're a great athlete, but no one is ever going to want to see you wrestle.
Famous last words.
Well, so what do you think about all that? I mean, is it just a culture of just being so dismissive of anyone young at that time?
Yes, yeah, very much so. And I'll try to speak not pro of them, but give a perspective. So they're looking at a dressing room where they have Ric Flair and they have Sting and they have this. There's Arn and Tully are still working, and there's, I think Murdoch was there at the turn, or Slater was there at the time. Orton, I believe, was going to be there very shortly. And, some young bucks like me and Pillman and Steve Austin and Zank and all the rest of us. You could look around, and first of all, those guys, your Flairs and those guys I mentioned at the top of the card, excuse me, they you can see how Ole would say, well, look, we got all these great stars who we're paying all this money to, and they're drawing the houses, and that's true to an extent. But they're each day that passes, these guys are getting older, and they've done this for a while, and somebody's been around as long as you should know that there's going to come a point where you can't do that anymore, where it just father time catches up. But they were always dismissive. The three names you mentioned, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and Tweedledummer, Jim Herd trying to explain, hands me a paper at one point when I was leaving and telling me what a mistake I was about to make, go to WWF because, and he shows me hands me a paper and I reach for it, he pulls back. He goes, no, you're probably not going to understand this being that you're a wrestler. I got 2 fucking master's degrees, you asshole, and understand. And the best part of it was he didn't understand the paper. The paper did not say what he thought it said. And so, yeah, they were very dismissive. When I was with Ricky, I had come in, I had been teaching prior to that. Originally, my foot had gotten in the door that Marty Jannetty had negotiated with Kip Fry for us to go in as the new Rockers, $5,000 per week. Well, this is when the girl ends up dead at a party at his house and off the table. I'd already put my resignation notice into teaching, so went in and minimum salary per night. Brian was making a much better chunk. Steve was making a much better chunk, and Ricky, of course, was making what Ricky deserved. And Bill Watts was in at that time and said, I won't get my full budget till next quarter. Please hang in there. And I promise you next quarter. Next quarter came. He gave me another song and dance, promised me that by the next quarter, by that time he was gone and Ole was in. So I go to meet with Ole and told him what Bill had said and what I was making. I was making $350 a night. Brian and Steve were making, I think, $156, and Steamer was making whatever he was making and deserving. And Ole said to me, well, I've looked at your contract and I don't know what you're complaining about. Excuse me. I'm making a pittance of what these other guys are, and I'm part of this match. And he said, well, I was making the same thing when I was your age. And I don't know.
What, in the 1920s?
Yes. And I said, okay, what did the hotel room cost then? What was a steak dinner then? What was a rental car then? What was a gallon of gas then? Very dismissive of the younger talent. And again, you can see where they can say, well, we got Flair and we got Dusty and we got all these 4 horsemen and we got all these great stars here. And yeah, but what about next month? What about next year or 5 years down the road? And oh yeah, this guy Steve Austin, stunning Steve Austin, you said wasn't worth anything, is now the biggest name in wrestling. This guy Shane Douglas that you said was worthless, he's got a company on the map. A guy named Mark Callis is going to be few people are going to remember him, right? Just again, it shows you the inanity of the brain trust that was WCW at that time, and how that company ultimately failed. There were a whole lot of hands involved in that, but that was all. If I was talking about these mosaics, and you look at the mosaic of WCW, Kip Fry's hands were in there by the huge contracts which is being thrown out. Then you have the Ole's and the Dusties and all these people that came in, the Jim Herds that brought their Pizza Hut business acumen with them. It's really stunning. And as you look back at it, it's laughable. And I don't think it's happenstance that you have Ivy League schools, which we can have a discussion on today, but where you have these MBA schools that are giving lectures on how not to run companies and using WCW as the example. That's how. And so that doesn't surprise me. In fact, as you were reading the story, I knew exactly where this thing is going, especially when you said Tweedledee Dumber and Dumber, Tweedledee Dumb and Dumber involved in the decision making process. But, kudos to Mark, because when you're that guy in the business, when you're at that stage of your career and you're sitting there and you're thinking like, man, I'm never going to be better than those guys over there. And you can't imagine in your young brain that, yeah, they're getting older every day and going to be moving on at some point. But that he was willing to go in there and stand his ground. And I'm certain that whatever they had in mind for Mark taking him to WWF, there's no guaranteeing that's going to work. It may work. It likely to. In hindsight, looks back, you say, well, sure, that was a no-brainer. Well, it was not. It wasn't a no-brainer then. And the fact that he was willing to stand up for himself and do that for the young kids out there, understand many that may not be getting these lavish contracts. Understand that, that every day there's going to be spots opening up. And if you have the faith in yourself, and Mark did, even then, like when he was doing the mean Mark Callis gimmick, you could see that he was sure of his ability. Not that he was, big headed or anything. Mark was a pretty down to earth guy. But the fact that there's those guys in the business that make it, like when Steve hit it big and when Mark hit it big. Those of us that knew him back then, oh man, that's cool as shit, because he's a good guy. And not just and Mark Mark Callis's way, the fact that he didn't just make it, he left an imprint on the business, and that's hard to do. That's to come into this conglomerate, this edifice called professional wrestling, and kaboom, leave this stamp called The Undertaker, legendary. And we throw that term around way too loosely in this industry, but boy, he really did do that. And then, with Vince's help coming up with the idea, but I go back and I look at those earliest years of The Undertaker. And by my taste, a little bit on the corny side, like, where we came from wrestling in the black boots and black tights type of thing. But when you see, Mark playing that out and you see the character evolving and getting a little bit past he's really a dead guy coming to life, in that crazy world that is WWE, WWF, okay, this guy's portraying this character, and it sort of transcends beyond that. It's like the guy playing Chewbacca, excuse me, in the Star Wars movies, that he really left that stamp. And, well done, Mark, that he was able to do that. And that he had at that young age where there's no guarantees for any of us, the stones to say, you know what, appreciate what you guys have done for me. I'm going to go give it a try over here. And, I wonder, 3, 4, 5 years later, when The Undertaker is the biggest thing in wrestling, do you think Ole or Jim Herd or any of these guys sat down and went, hey, Ole, what an idiot you were. Remember, like, when we had this guy and you said, like, nobody knows who you are? Well, they do now. It's so, the types of things for me that all of us, we were those young spring chickens, because it's, again, when you put in real time and place and you're sitting in that moment and going like, drum roll in your head, am I going to do this? Am I going to walk away and, maybe get this door slammed in my face in the future? Am I going to be done? Am I going to get like the stamp of, hey, don't trust that guy? There's a lot of self-doubt that comes into it. And, I think that the wisdom that comes with age is that Mark had a little bit more insight or a lot bigger stones than most people have to take that chance and swing for the fence. And man, boy, hits the proverbial grand slam at the bottom of the ninth, right? It's kudos. Yeah, nice stuff.
Yeah. If I ever get to interview Mark Calloway, I'm going to say, you've been described as the Chewbacca of wrestling, and see what he says.
I think if you put it in context, he'll totally get it. It's
I might do the thing as well to see what happens with him. Right, I'm probably going to run through 2 more things and then we'll have got to our time, maybe 3 if we've got the time. I want to bring up this because practically no one seems to have mentioned this. Dennis Knight, the former Midian Phineas Godwin,
yes.
Tex Slazenger.
Good
You'll
dude.
Probably know him best from Tex Slazenger from WCW. 54, he lost a large part of his right foot in an accident at his job of being a chef.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he said he had half of his right foot amputated about 6 months ago. A rack of shelves with hundreds of pounds of food fell off a broken back deck and landed on his foot. Because of his back injuries from wrestling, his legs are numb from the knee down, so it didn't hurt. And he went home, took off his sock, and found 2 of his toes were just hanging there. And he went to so he went to the hospital. He was there for 5 days getting antibiotics, and they had to amputate part of his right foot. Terrible news. And everyone says the same thing. Great guy.
This is the first I've heard this. I am so disconnected whenever I'm home. It's like 2 different worlds. At home, I'm the single dad cooking dinner and washing dishes.
This is completely flown under the radar. I've not really seen many people refer to this at all, and this is why I'm specifically mentioning it, because 1, it's terrible, and 2, best wishes to him, of course.
Oh my God, yeah, he really good. And you know what? When he and Mark, I always get his last name, Henry Godwin,
Canterbury.
Yeah, Canterbury. It was just good dudes, man. I mean, just really fun guys, great to work with, and those big bastards could really fly around, man. It was simple to work with, just the proverbial night off for us. And Dennis, you're going to get the same comment from everybody. Just a great guy. I'm going to have to give him a call and let him. I think there's a tendency in our business that we all grow apart in different ways and go in different directions. And I would imagine you can sit there and think, hey, man, I'm not hearing from any of my friends or whatever. I honest to God, that is the first. Moose never even mentioned that. So what a horrific thing. It's life, right? I mean, this is the stuff like we parents talk about like to our kids walking out the door, like, hey, be careful. And I remember like getting my mother when she would say that. I get it now. I mean, I totally get it. It's work as a chef. I mean, like when you hear it, I'm sure Dennis could probably laugh about it. You think like, come on, being a chef, how dangerous can that be? Well, this is the stuff that happens, and man, my heart goes out to him. And like, if there's anything that can be done for him, and he is, just it sounds like you're just belaboring the point and making, just like repeating and hit the loop button. These are guys that I spent like an incredibly special time in my young life with and working with, and those big guys would get, bump their butts off to make Ricky and I look like champions. And, that's no small thing, and looking back at it, to go out to that ring and just put that kind of effort in, to make somebody else look like champions is not lost on me. That's no small thing, because they didn't have to. They could go on in there and done their thing and try to get themselves over in the process. And Dennis and Mark both were not those guys. And both of them, like when I conjure pictures right now in my head of them, there's always big smiles on their faces. Hey, Shane, just like good dudes to be around. And, when you're on the road 7 days a week with people, the guy picks his teeth or makes a little noise or whatever. That's the kind of stupid stuff that starts to get under your skin. And you never got old of being around those guys. So yeah, my heart goes out to him. I'm definitely going to give him a call on my way home today. Because it's funny, again, what a small world. My friend Ned Rolsman, the actor, had gone in Pittsburgh last night, was the Undertaker one-man show, or one dead man show, as they call it. And I get a text last night about midnight. Mark Canterbury says hello. So Mark was at the show too, and I texted back, oh man, tell Mark I said hello. Great guy. But oddly enough, he was just down here. I was first stop in town last night. I pulled in to go and grab something to eat and get a drink real quick. And there's a post right on the wall that he was yesterday somewhere in this area, and then last night pops up there, and now you hear that about Dennis. Yeah. First I heard that. I wonder how that's flown under the radar, because typically those are the types of things you'll within hours, somebody will hit you up and say, hey, by the way, did you hear about Dennis? Wow, horrific. I'm definitely going to give him a call today.
Yes, so this apparently happened 6 months ago, according to this. That was from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, by the way, that I quoted from there. Now, for the very last thing that we're going to talk about, it's actually going to be a video, so if you just hold on 1 minute, I'll tee it up for you. Right, so Shane's laughing because he said it's a swimsuit model, and I went, that's Vince McMahon.
I see now, as you say, yeah, they're going to take the specs off here, the cheaters, and but when is that picture taken? Because it does look like
that's probably going to be when he was in his 40s or something. It's not about Vince McMahon, this clip, by the way. This is actually from Bubba Army, so this is a Bubba the Love Sponge clip from many years ago with Hulk Hogan on it. So listen to this story. You may want to listen to it twice because it's so nice. But the follow-up question will be quite obvious, but have a listen to this.
Tell me the story, the one time that Vince hid you in his attic for like a month.
That's when the feds were looking for me.
The feds were looking for you to testify against him, and he right?
Yeah, it was a good plan for a while.
And
I think Macho was one to stooge us out.
Now, where did he hide you at?
A whole bedroom upstairs, like a whole house upstairs.
And he hid you up there, and like, were you're not allowed to go out in public? You couldn't do any.
I didn't want to go. I was scared.
Where did they finally track you down at?
Well, I think Macho came over to talk to Vince about whatever bookings or business, whatever. And Randy and I had this whistle that he used to call his German Shepherd, that like that,
right?
Like a dumbass, I did it when Randy was in the house to let him know I was upstairs. Next thing I know, the feds were banging on the door 2 days later.
You think he's the one that stooged you?
Oh, I think so.
Gordon Bennett. That's do you want to listen to any of that again, or did you get it?
No, I got it. Yeah, it's never heard that.
Well, you probably never heard it because, I mean, I hate to cast aspersions on Hulk Hogan, but there may have been a little bit of embellishment that he hid in Vince McMahon's attic or upstairs to avoid the federal government for a month or more.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, it was. I mean, I don't think he's like behind, like you pull the candle in the wall moves type of thing. You know, I don't think it was like that. But
so have you ever heard of this? Because so let's put context into this. He's talking about the steroid trial which happened in '94. Mm-hmm. So I think Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon fell out August '93, something like that. Mm-hmm. So nearly a year before the trial. So I'm wondering, at what point did Hulk Hogan hang about in Vince McMahon's house for an entire month, avoiding the federal government?
Yeah,
in that sense, and also somehow Randy Savage turned up one day, heard a whistle, and then he stewed. What?
Yeah,
it's fanciful.
It sounds colorful. God, it's been so long ago. Again, being young in the business, and you know, the scuttlebutt that was at that time was that Hogan was going to testify against Vince McMahon. And the scuttlebutt in the business was, well, if anybody would know where the bodies are, right, it would be the Hulkster. And when he turned hostile on the stand, you know, there's the old saying from attorneys, never ask a question you don't know the answer to, right? And, you know, by putting this guy in the stand, you know, once he's up there, you can't say, oh, okay, we're done. Get the hook and yank him off. You know, he's up there to do it. Sounds more to me, if that were the case, that Vince did in some way get to him and say, okay, well, you know, if you do this or do that, you know, we'll open the vault back up for you. And, you know, Hogan, if for nothing else, and I don't say this in any kind of accusatory way, Hogan is one of those rare breeds in the business that could have single-handedly unionized the business, or, you know, waved the magic wand and made life better for a whole lot of people. People that worked to get him over, like Kamala, and, you know, across the board, everybody. Saturday Night Main Event or WrestleMania, I'm a Great American is playing, and hey Vince, let me talk to you. I'm not going to the ring until you sign this or that. You know, the numbers that I recall, I think back in that original run, Hogan made $6 million, I think was the public number that was put out, and made another $14 million that year from endorsements. What would Hulk Hogan have made? Because 93 is the year the NFL started naming a franchise player for each team, and that meant that they had to be paid the average of the top 5 salaries in that position in the league. In a company, you know, WWF had 100, and let's be generous to them, probably 150 wrestlers under contract at that time. The NFL and the NHL, the NFL has 1,600 players. NHL has 1,400 players. So we're talking 3,000 players. How many front office personnel? How many assistant coaches? How many, you know, trainers and this and that, and publicists and all those types of things? Thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There were several years back in the 90s when the WWF outgrossed the NFL and NHL combined. Say that again. More than both the NFL and NHL combined. That's a lot of money. And again, thousands and thousands of people. And the average salaries in those top 5 spots were pretty big chunks of money even for that time. What would Hulk Hogan, who was arguably by far and away the biggest wrestling name on the planet at that time, been worth? You know, probably could have taken the check and just kept adding zeros, you know, and Vince would have had to have paid it. So he did himself a disservice at the same time. My guess would be, knowing Vince like I know him, which is nowhere near as well as I know other people, but knowing of the Mr. McMahon type character and the character that he is, you know, the person that he is running that company, that he knows that Hogan knows where these bodies are. Just a question of how did he get a hold of Hogan, you know, with the feds, you know, ringing around him if they were at that time. But no doubt in my mind, there was some kind of backroom deal made there because, Vince is the kind of person, once you cross him, you're done. And, they're, like you said, they had that falling out, and you got Vince and he had this run past that. And, he's periodically dipped back in there many times. I find it like, I'll stay the high road and say with your words, fanciful, is a colorful term used. But yeah, there was definitely some skullduggery, because I remember when Hogan turned hostile on the stand, like that was like a in the middle of the trial, like everybody thinks it's going a certain way. And, but back to bring us back to even more recent stuff. If you recall, Vince's one of his first comments in emerging from the courthouse is he takes off the fake neck brace, right? Ta-da, it's the prop. And he says, I'm Vincent effing McMahon. Well, you don't go to the federal government and go, hey, feds, I just beat you in court, because they're going to sit back and let's say I'm the guy that's retiring that tried to get him. And I'm not going, oh, let's just tear that fella up. I never got him. I'm going to say to you, the young guy coming in, hey, keep your eye on this guy. And when you retire, keep an eye on that guy and keep passing it down. And sooner or later, the feds are going to get you for something. When you're running a company that big, there's a myriad of different things. There's a saying, an adage over here that every day the average American breaks the law 100 times a day or something like that. So when you're running a $1 billion multinational corporation, the feds can get you at some point. Just much, much better and much smarter to come out and say, I'm thankful. I'm ready to move on and take the WWF to different heights and get back to the family business instead of I'm Vince McMahon and I'm going to screw you. That would be my guess. It certainly sounds auspicious in the way that, it played out there that, hey, I'm just hiding out in I'm seeing like in Young Frankenstein, the scene where they get caught, she gets caught in the wall with the candle and it keeps spinning around. It's, Vince has this hidden lair in his house someplace. And with him, who knows, he probably does. It's, I think they call them panic rooms now, right? Or whatever. So,
well, he's got a portrait of himself in his front room, Vince McMahon. So anything is possible with that man. You know what? Yes. We actually have a couple of minutes left in this show, so I'm going to use to. Sorry, yes, Shane.
You said about the painting. When you walk through, the eyeballs in the painting
will follow you all the way around
across the room as you're walking through there.
No, with his, I think his triceps flex when you walk past it. If you've seen that painting,
yeah. I need to get me one of those. I need to get a big franchise painting on the wall here. Put a candle underneath it every night, It's.
Did you? I know you're a big Kiss fan. Did you ever hear the Paul Stanley story where he had a giant mural painted of him and his child, with nubile naked women surrounded him there in like a forest or something like that? And he said and Paul Stanley looked at it and went, "This is amazing." And then when he finally married his current wife, and his wife went, "I've always hated that." And then it took him that long for Paul to look at it and go, that is stupid. What was I thinking? And then they just paint over the next day.
He's one of those guys. It's funny when you hear I was listening to Sirius a couple of weeks ago, and they had put a Kiss song on. They put like a Gene Simmons talking or Paul Stanley talking or whatever. Gene, talking about, or Paul talking about Gene, said, he's like the brother I never had. We never see each other. We never do anything, but I know he'd be there for me if I needed it. It's like, hey, screw that guy's personality drives me crazy. But, there's definitely a chemistry there of opposites attract. And, the thing with Paul is, to me anyway, is like, I don't think you get lucky to hit that stratosphere like that. There's very few groups that have ascended there. By the way, have you heard the newest Beatles song, which I think is really cool?
Oh, I'm in two minds about it, because I'm in two minds about it, is what I am. I've listened to it quite a few times, though, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I liked the new songs they put out back in the 90s when they did it.
Was it Free as a Bird, and was it the other one, Free Love? Or was
Free Love and... Free Love and Free as a Bird. Now, this one, what was interesting about it was, and I know we're way off topic here, but Peter King, when he did the Beatle movie that he did, I forget what it was called. It was amazing, by the way. They went back and they put together pieces, like a newsreel, with like when they first arrive at JFK Airport, and somebody asks about Elvis, and Ringo Starr does the shake like Elvis, right? And then they're all laughing. Well, the newsreel only has the video. And then somebody else was there at the radio station, like recording the stuff. And then Peter was able to go back and get all that millions of footage, put it together. But more interestingly, if you've seen it, when they're playing the Hollywood Bowl and the cameras are panning the crowd and stuff, well, he's gone through and he finds Sigourney Weaver as a teenager in that crowd and different people like that. It's really amazing. Well, on this, when he did that, he created a new technology, Peter King did, where they could take a song, and back then a group would go in and they would do multi-tracks, but like they might, Paul's playing the bass and George and John are both playing guitar and Ringo's playing drums. They're all in the studio at the same time. And you think there's no way to ever going to be separating those out because they're not singular tracks just placed together. Yeah. Peter King has produced a technology where they can go in and drop everything out but the bass, drop everything out but the drums. So they were able to isolate that. And so in a real sense, they're getting George Harrison really playing the guitar, even though he's been dead for how many years? John Lennon, they were able to isolate his voice away from, it was a cassette tape. The original piece was a cassette tape, and isolate his voice away and then augment it through the computer and everything. And like he said, in a real sense, this is like the last Beatles song. Like, this is really all four of them playing on it. And I think that's a neat thing, especially because two of the guys are gone and never going to, get that new music, but it's, really cool stuff. I thought it was pretty neat to see how they put it together, and cool track.
It was real love, not free love. I knew I got that.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know? I'll take a few minutes off the next show because I do want to touch on this before we go.
Okay.
And have you seen Big Show, Paul White, recently? His condition.
No, but I was told it had it described to me in quite detail.
Right, I'll tee up a photo. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm going to show you a picture of Big Show now, and I'm also going to compare it to Kevin Nash. Now, this is actually in a video with Dutch Mantel, but you get the idea. So, there we go.
Oh, Kevin looks phenomenal, huh?
Yeah, but have a look at his knee.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So
same thing, right?
Yeah, so Big Show's sort of got the same thing there. I think there's two reasons why I'm bringing this up. One is I know, let's say if I've got Paul White under contract, it just doesn't strike me as the greatest idea to put him out like that, because it looks like he's going to be putting a huge amount of pressure on his hip, and being physical just isn't the best idea for him, maybe. But you tell me, what do you think?
Well,
what's your takeaway?
So at the Rhino show the other night, I would say probably 30% of the fans that came to the table to get autographs and pictures were asking me this. Hey, did you see this? Blah, 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 blah. And then Kentucky last week, the same thing. And the way it was described to me was like his legs were all mangled and it looked really tough for him to walk and everything. Like I said about Flair earlier, Paul White is known. We don't need him in boots and tights to be in the ring and doing this kind of stuff. And you're putting him into a position that we're all going to be 90 years old one day. Hopefully we make it to 90. We're all going to go, yeah, I can get in there and show the kids something. It's that kind of a drug. But should you be in there? That's I think the bigger question. And I think this goes again to, and this is in no way being judgmental on who does or doesn't have a contract there, but we were told multiple times that this was not going to become a home for ex-WWE wrestlers. Now, you can make the argument these are big names and they're going to, their fans tune in to watch the show or whatever. I think there's scant evidence of that right now. And that's not necessarily their fault. I think it's the presentation of the show. We always remember, because our business is a work, we are only limited by what we can create up here. So put your thinking caps on and say, okay, I got a guy named Paul White, a giant. How can I utilize him in this? Doesn't necessarily mean being in boots and tights. If that's the first of all, it's the lowest hanging fruit, right? Hey, I got a great idea. Let's put him out there in boots and tights. Wow, you're brilliant. But to put him out there in that kind of a compromise, and God forbid, what if that had given out while he's out there? It's the last thing you want to be seen as, one of my friends that was asked to work with Ric Flair prior to him taking the match that he would ultimately in his last match, his penultimate match, I guess. he said his exact words were, "You're not hanging that albatross around my neck." Meaning he ain't gonna die in the ring with me. It's and I would contend, like the Tony out there, you don't need to have Big Show out there. You can put him out there in slacks, and nice shirt, whatever, and he's going to get whatever reaction he's going to get, whether he's in that or an armored car. So get more creative with this stuff. And again, I don't know if Big Show asked for that segment. I would find that hard to believe, but if he did, then as the boss, you're supposed to say, well, we could actually use you better over here and do this. I think we get a lot more mileage out of you doing something else. This business, as you can see from those pictures, this business takes its toll on your body. I mean, this is not if you don't want to be all, hurt and crippled and achy when you're 39 like I am, then you should probably get out of this business. It's that's the end result. And there's no wrestler in that dressing room that harbors the idea, hey, I can have a great career. I can be at the top of the card and I can have a long career. I ain't never going to get hurt. It's just like, part of the territory that we accept. So get creative. Paul White's a big name, as have had others there. But again, I think they're being less than creative. Announcers and this and that. Like, it's just, you pluck somebody and you say, okay, we're going to give you a lot of money in a contract because we have a really phenomenal idea for you. Not, hey, James, you had a great podcast with Dutch, so I'm going to sign you a big contract over and put you over here and just have you sit there because that's what we need you to do. If I've got a business plan for you, if you can augment my business, then of course do it. But it shouldn't just be, hey, we could get a hold of so-and-so. Let's write a big old check with a bunch of zeros and get them in there and then do that with them. I think his fans are, based off of what I heard the last couple of weeks, last couple of events that I've been to, the fans were, the predominant question was, why did they do that? Like, his legs were on, and why was he out there doing that? I don't know. I'm not in that company. I can't answer that question. But I think it does a disservice to him. It does a disservice to his fans. And it really does nothing to augment the AEW product. So strike. It's get creative. And if that's the limits of your creativity, maybe it's time to, everybody's creative well is not bottomless. It's a finite tank. And once that starts to run low, I saw with Paul Heyman, as creative as he was, when his tank ran dry, I don't think it's just, strategy or being wise or playing coy that he hasn't booked anywhere. I think it's because that tank ran dry, and it's a lot easier. He's a great talker on the mic, and he can do what he does right now without effort. But suddenly, boom, here's the company. It's yours. Let's take it to the next stage. That's a different beast. And so I think it's time for them to start to consider going a different direction if there's any hope to grow that company.
Just to add this, and then I'm going to do the outro, and then I'm going to run out and get a sandwich because I'm starving. So just to qualify this, Paul White had knee surgery last year that saw him in a wheelchair for 11 weeks because obviously the weight, his weight, you can't put pressure on it. He's had hip issues, he's had back issues, he's in his 50s now, and he's been signed with AEW for 2 years and had 4 matches. Now his next one will be this coming Wednesday, in fact, will be his 5th. So we'll see what happens there, and I'll be watching it maybe with bated breath, who knows, to see what happens. But for now, I'm going to shut down this podcast. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We're on every single Tuesday. I don't know when we release. Morning time is when it comes out, for goodness sake. Also, Franchise University with Shane Douglas is the name of the podcast. The YouTube channel is Shane Douglas Official. There is going to be more stuff out there, video-wise, from Shane himself personally, as well as clips from this podcast every single day. Thank you very much for watching once again, Shane. I'm going to throw it to you for the close.
Hey, you've been sitting around the learning tree with the franchise and James Romero at Franchise University.